Hello, welcome everybody to this video. My name is Patrick Payne. I'm the technical evangelist here at Zoomasys, and today I'm going to show you how to get a quick start with jBase installed on Windows 10, and get you quickly started up with the RESTful services. So when we're done here, you'll actually have PIC installed on your Windows laptop. You can experience the native features of jBase, plus you'll have your full features of PIC, and you'll have RESTful services. So to get started, I'm going to do some prerequisites that you should have installed on your computer before we get started. And the first one is Microsoft's .NET Framework 3.5. The installer will actually attempt to install this, as it is a requirement for the compiler, because it installs Microsoft's compiler. I have personally had issues on Windows 10 where it seems to get stuck through that process. So I just recommend that you just install the .NET Framework before you run the jBase installer. Quite often you actually already have this installed, but as I'm doing this on a clean Windows 10 virtual machine with no software installed, I needed to go and install this. Second application I want you to install is Postman. Postman is a free application that you use for testing your actual REST services. While you can do a few things with the browser, this tool gives you full control, and it's pretty much what everybody uses. So I'll be demoing using this package. All right, so let's get started. I have already downloaded jBase, and I've already received my evaluation key. You need to have that before you get started, as the installer will ask for your evaluation key and won't let you continue without it. So we just click and launch the jBase executable. Let's just use the defaults for all the questions. It'll install off the C drive in a jBase directory. It creates a jBase admin Windows user. Here you enter your key. So I'll copy and paste it from my email. And now jBase will install. I'm actually pausing the video during this period to speed through the install. The install usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, the installer is just about done, and what it will move on to next is installing the stuff required for Microsoft C++ environment, and next it will move on to installing the actual compiler if you don't have the compiler already. Ways you could already have the compiler is that it comes with Visual Studio. So if you have Visual Studio installed, you already have the command line CL compiler. All right, at this point, it should start running the C++ compiler installer. Now, right there is where if you don't install the .NET Framework first, at this moment, as it starts to fire up the C++ installer, the C++ installer will then say it has a dependency of the .NET environment. It then fires up Windows' own add features to add the .NET Framework, and that appears to be where some of the issue is. The installer works fine on a Windows servers, and even on the old Windows 7 desktops. It's something new with Windows 10. At this moment, it's letting you know if you want to use any of the inbound connections, just like with any Windows machine or even Linux, you'll have to adjust your firewall rules to allow Telnet in. jBase does come with a Telnet daemon, so you can actually Telnet now to your Windows laptop. And as long as you have your firewall open, you'll get a jBase login prompt, just like your old classic PIC machines. So now it's going to go to the last piece, which is going to configure the system. And this is all around the compiler. Remember, with jBase, we actually transpile all your code down to C and compile it. On Linux, we use a GCC compiler. On Windows, we use Microsoft's compiler. So what this is doing is into installing the actual Microsoft C++ compiler. So what this button here is going to do, and you should read all these instructions, it's going to launch the Microsoft installer, which means we've jumped out of the jBase installer into their installer. Once it's done, it'll jump back here. So let's click. And what it does is it shows a little screen shot of the options you should pick within the install options, the minimums. All right, so let's go next, where it's going to install it. And we do not need the documentation. We do not need the samples within the header files. We don't need those libraries. We don't need a .NET development environment, but we do need the Win32 development tools. We don't need application verifier or debugging tools. If you want them, go ahead and install them, but they are not required. What we're really looking for is a C++ compiler, the header libraries, and the Win32 development tools, which is where I believe it gives us the CL command line compiler. Once again, I'm going to pause this while this is actually installing and jump to the end. It usually takes, it's about a 700-800 meg file. It's downloading it and installing it, so you're looking at about 15-20 minutes for this to complete. Okay, there, the compiler is done. Usually uncheck this box. If you don't, it'll pop up an IE window with some notes. Okay, so now it returns back to the jBase compiler. And now it says it successfully found the compiler, and now it wants to update your default environment variables. And we have to actually hit this button here, Update Environment Variables. And we are done, and we have installed jBase. And it has logged you into the default jBase admin account. Think of that account a little like a sysprog on the old D3 systems. It's the default account. Okay, now that jBase is installed, there's a couple different ways you can get into jBase. You can either go right down into the menu and pick the administrator user, and it will log in. Since jBase is actually native, this is actually just a different shell. You can type command and see where you're at. So these default accounts install underneath the jBase directory. jlicense info will tell you your user situation. The second way you can do it is you can actually, from any PowerShell or command box, you can also just type JB for jBase. JB for jBase, jBase admin, and you're in. And at this point, shows that we have two users and we're using it too. So there's two different ways you can get in there. Now let's fire up our JAgent. Now JAgent is a daemon program. It should be installed as a service. The default install right now is not doing that. There's instructions on the website how to install it. But usually as you're doing testing, and you're learning how to set up environment variables and get all that to set up, it's usually better to run it in the foreground. So usually to start up JAgent, we're going to open up a second DOS box. We're going to go into the directory where we want to run our programs from. In this case, we're just going to use the jBase admin account. We're going to fire up the jBase agent program, which is jBase_agent, and then give it the default config file, which is in jBase current version config jagent config. In this video, I'm not going to go into the configurations. This is a quick start. You will actually have pick up and running and be able to compile and get some REST stuff running as long as you're doing it from the jBase admin account. It fires off. Its default port is 2002. Here you see Windows actually opening up and saying, do you wish to open up the firewall? So now we have jagent running. We can now bring up our browser. Okay, let's scratch that. We're now going to open up and test our actual REST service. For this, we're going to actually use Postman. So we're going to go in here and find our Postman application, launch it. If you're a big user of Chrome, Postman is also a Chrome plugin. And I also recommend, as you're doing any web development, to actually install Chrome. It actually has probably the best debugger for working with services. They all have it. Internet Explorer, Netscape, or Mozilla, Firefox, they all have debugging tools in them. I use Chrome, so you'll see me referencing Chrome. So this is the Postman interface. You just go in here just like a normal URL, and you will go to localhost port 2002. API is our default directive. wrest test. This is a default testing program that comes with the package. And what it will do is it will actually respond and does things like a who, what the path is. It actually, if you're in jBase, it does a jshow to show you the current environment as it was set up, where it found the code. It dumps off things like vars and cookies and headers. It's a really nice testing tool. So if you're in here wanting to test sending variables and headers and stuff, you can actually run them and you should see them show up right in here. And to give an example, we'll go in here and send a URL variable. My name is Patrick. When that runs, you should see here in the vars name Patrick. Here you're going to see JSON as a payload. And here we have Postman now talking into jBase, and those connections are all being handled by this window. So if we go over here and do this again, you'll see the request coming in. All right, so now we've got jBase installed. We've got REST talking to us, and so we'll real quickly here make your first test program. On jBase, I'm going to first create me a BP file to do this in. So create file BP, type equals UD. What this means is it's going to create as a directory type, so it's actually directories. Now I'm going to create my program, and I'm going to create just a real simple hello world program. jBase has two editors. The ED editor is very similar to the D3 editor. It also has JED, which is a really nice full screen editor. Here, we're just going to do one simple thing, which is send some data back. And for this demo, I'm just going to keep it real simple. We're going to just build the JSON directly here. So we're going to say response, variable, and value. Messed up that. So response, okay. Real simple. Now we're going to compile our program. Catalog our program. We can run our program now. Right here from Tickle. Now, in order to expose it to the web, we have a file called the WDB resource file, which was created automatically for you. And as you can see, it already has the REST test in there. We're going to create a new one for API. And this one is going to be called Hello World. Think of this as a form of a catalog. First one is just a P. Second thing is your freeform description. Hello World demo page. 3 is the name of the actual pick program to execute. 4 is blank. 5 and 6 is 1. Those are both options. For your purposes of REST services, just always put a 1 and 5 and 6. This whole web server actually is the basis for products we have, such as Bravo reports and the dashboard. And so that maintains backwards compatibility for those. So now that we have created that, we should be able to go up here now and we have now responded. So we've built our first real basic REST service. Please move up next into my other videos where I start going into more detail on what REST really is and actually getting more into the programming and how you get access to headers and all that other stuff. I also like to point out we have documentation. So if you go to ZoomAssist under MV Connect or under jBase looking at RESTful services, you can go down to the documentation page, which will bring up the manual. And when you get it'll show you how to install it if you're on other platforms, because what we're showing here is how jBase has it natively built in. But it also is available on other platforms using the MV connector. Once you get to the pick side, all the coding is exactly the same. So we go over here. And as we go down to the documentation, all the subroutines that we make available to you. So for example, you saw us use wsend. Here's documentation that explains to you what that function does. But there's functions in here to set the content type, set the headers. These are all standard functions. Again, I have other videos that will go into detail and explain to you how that works. So thank you for watching the video.